And that concludes questions for oral answer. I have received a letter from Kelvin Davis seeking to debate Understanding Order 389, the allegations about organised fighting, the taking of drugs and access to contraband by prisoners at Mount Eden Corrections Facility. This is a particular case of recent occurrence involving ministerial responsibility. Mount Eden Corrections Facility is managed by a private provider, but the prisoners remain the ultimate responsibility of the state. The Minister of Corrections has announced an investigation into the allegations of organised fighting and possession of contraband. It is absolutely critical that the public have confidence in our corrections system. Having carefully considered this application, I have decided to allow a debate. I call on Kelvin Davis to move that the House take note of an urgent matter of public importance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and let me say that the Serco Fight Club situation is an absolute debacle. It is a fiasco, it's a shambles, and it's an embarrassment not only to this minister but to the government. And it's been going on for 3 years now that prisoners have been getting their lights punched out on almost a daily basis, and it's gone on under the watch of Serco. There's so many issues wrong with Serco that it's actually difficult to know where to start. But let's start with this. Serco should never, ever have been given the contract to run prisons in New Zealand from the start. We believe that the act of taking away someone's liberty and their rehabilitation should always be the responsibility of the state. But not only that, let's look at Serco's record. It was just in November, December of 2013 that company was made to repay the United Kingdom government £68 million because they were charging for work that they weren't actually doing. And that work was the watching over of inmates when they're rehabilitated into the community. And what happened, Mr. Speaker? I mean, £68 million.
Order. I'm sorry to interrupt the member. I ask members who are leaving the chamber to do so expeditiously. Order. Order, please. And for those, please quieten down. It's difficult to hear the Speaker. Kelvin Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. £68 million, Mr. Speaker, is not chicken feed now, and Serco over in the UK were charging for work that they weren't doing. They were charging for monitoring of people who had been released into the community, and the reality is many of those people had actually been returned to prison. Secondly, they were monitoring people who had actually passed away. This is not a company that can be relied upon, Mr. Speaker. On top of that, Serco was not considered, they were considered so unethical that the New Zealand Superannuation Fund refused to have them as part of their portfolio. And that's because they own a third of the shares in a company that makes nuclear warheads. Bevan Hanlon, Mr. Speaker, of the Corrections Association, raised issues 18 months ago around the Fight Club situation. And what have Corrections done about it in that time, Mr. Speaker? They've done absolutely nothing. They've sat on their hands. In fact, it goes back beyond 18 months. It goes back to at least September 2012, when 3 News reported about Martin Littleton, who was an inmate in Serco. He said violence was rife, especially in the Auckland Central Remand Prison. They were running fight clubs in the mainstream unit. Mr. Speaker, this is in September of 2012. There's a reference to the running of fight clubs in mainstream units at Mount Eden Correctional Facility. He goes on to say a lot of people were getting bashed up in that fight club type scene. In some cases, the guards were actually sanctioning assaults by inmates on other inmates. And what has happened in that time? They were waiting, Mr. Speaker, for some hard evidence. They sat on their hands until video emerged on YouTube, sent out by contraband smuggled into Serco, that shows that this company has been negligent at best, Mr. Speaker. Then there's the report that was tabled on the 9th of July last year that actually covered all of these issues, Mr. Speaker. It spoke about fight clubs. Apparently, this report is so bad it makes terrible reading. And a high-ranking corrections officials received that report, Mr. Speaker, and I ask the Minister to table that report that was tabled on the 9th of July last year, and also the minutes of the meeting where it was tabled, so we can see who were the corrections officials who received the copy, so we know who got it and when they got it and what they did about it. Well, we actually know what they did about it, Mr. Speaker. They did absolutely nothing, to the extent that we've seen in the Fight Club videos. Ray Smith, the Chief Executive of Corrections, admitted hearing about the Fight Club, but he wanted hard evidence. He got the evidence now in those YouTube videos. But I mean, it makes me wonder, what about the black eyes? What about the bruises? What about the missing teeth? Were those not evidence that something was going on in Mount Eden prison? Why did he have to wait for the release of these videos? Which raises the issue of whether those injuries sustained by prisoners were ever reported. See, in prisons, Mr. Speaker, if there's an incident, guards will rush in and they'll stop things. Then they all write up their incident reports, which goes to make a combined report about the incident. And yet, I can always guarantee that there will not be incident reports from Serco, but there will be medical records that have been kept around the injuries sustained by prisoners. And it makes me wonder, what is the correlation between the medical records and the incident reports? I'd like to know if the Minister could table the correlation between the medical records. We don't need to know the prisoners' names. We just need to know the numbers. We need to know the injuries and see if the medical records that have been collected at Mount Eden Correctional Facility correlate with the numbers of incident reports. And I can almost guarantee that that is not going to happen. A spokeswoman for Serco said on the 24th of November 2014, "We report every incident, no matter how minor." Well, if that's the case, there should be those incident reports that I've just spoken about. And I'd love to know if the numbers of incident reports and the numbers of medical reports actually correlate. These allegations, Mr. Speaker, that prisoners have been transported out of Mount Eden Correctional Facility to other facilities such as Ngāwha, such as Manawatu, such as Whanganui, who have severe injuries. Now, why would anybody transfer an inmate with severe injuries? And let me tell you the story about one prisoner, prisoner Evans, who arrived at Ngāwha, the prison up in Northland there, with a punctured lung. He was in such bad shape that almost immediately the guards at Ngāwha transferred him to Whangarei Hospital, where he subsequently passed away. Now, sorry, it wasn't a punctured lung, it was a ruptured lung, and there is a difference. A puncture is when something goes into you. A rupture is when it bursts from the outside. And if you ask any doctor or nurse, anybody who's involved in medicine, how do you get a rupture? They'll tell you that it often occurs in something like a high-speed accident, such as a car crash. We've all heard of people rupturing their spleens in a car crash. Well, this guy had a ruptured lung. And I'm told on good authority that there is a practice in Mount Eden Correctional Facility that is called dropping, where prisoners, new prisoners usually, who walk into the Mount Eden Correctional Facility are sized up by gangs, they're bashed up, and they're dropped off the balconies onto the concrete below for good measure. That's what happened to prisoner Evans. He was dropped off the balcony, his lung was ruptured, but then he was transferred out of Mount Eden Correctional Facility, sent north to Ngāwha. And I want to know which prison, Mount Eden or Ngāwha, was that injury recorded in? Because I suspect that prisoners with injuries are transported out of the Serco-run Mount Eden Correctional Facility so that the statistics doesn't reflect on Serco. Unfortunately, prisoner Evans passed away. So people are dying because of Serco. We cannot underestimate the damage and the danger that is going on. And I hear the Minister say that's untrue. Well, It would be great to hear what he's got to say. It would be great to hear how he's going to stand up and justify how a prisoner can be transferred out of Mount Eden Correctional Facility with a ruptured lung, only to arrive at Ngāwha, only to be transferred to Whangarei and die within a couple of weeks. Now, I know what he'll say. He'll say, oh, the drugs were bacteria-resistant drugs. Well, how does that correlate with a ruptured lung? He shouldn't have got the ruptured lung in the first place. So at the end of May last year, a prisoner arrived at Wanganui prison. He was limping. Why was he limping? Because he had 2 broken legs. 2 broken legs. He was transferred out of Mount Eden Correctional Facility, and he was dropped off a landing as well. It was written up as a medical report, but not reported as an incident report. Mr. Speaker, we have people that are telling us these things, and I know that this government doesn't want to hear it. They don't want to know what's really going on, because it reflects badly on the decision that they made to take on to give Serco the contract. And like I say, people are dying. I've had 4 parents contact me over the weekend, and they said that their sons who are in prison, and we know that they've committed crimes to get into prison, but their sons in prison are saying, Mum, if we don't get involved in the fight clubs, we will get the bash. That is the culture that is going on in the Serco-run prison at Mount Eden now. A prisoner from was sent from Mount Eden to Ngāwha. No, sorry, he was sent from Ngāwha to Mount Eden. 3 weeks later, and he was intact, by the way, when he left Ngāwha. He came back 3 weeks later with a broken jaw. No record of the assault was made. There was no incident report, but there should be a medical report that exists. And he says, I'm making it up. The minister has obviously not spoken to the people who work in Serco. He's not spoken to the people who work in corrections facilities, because these are people who are really concerned about the conditions that they work in, the understaffing that's going on at Serco. They're telling us because they are scared. They don't want to tell the minister, because they know that their jobs are on the line as soon as they speak out, because that's what happens to whistleblowers. It's not about doing what's right, it's about doing what's going to keep the minister off their back and what's going to keep their jobs. It's a disgraceful situation around Serco. Here's another thing that I've been told, Mr. Speaker. When prisons have audits, an auditor will turn up at a prison unannounced and will demand on the day the things that they need to look at. I have it on good authority that Serco gets warned in advance. They get told, and they get told by a high-ranking corrections official that, and I won't tell you who told it because he will lose his job. But they go in and they already know what they're going to be looked at, and this is the very reason why Serco is getting such high rankings in the tables, because they know what's going to be audited before the auditors get there, and they have everything, all the paperwork ready. It's a disgrace, Mr. Speaker. I just want to finish off with a letter from a man, J.B. Kerwin. Kerwin is spelled K-E-R-W-I-N. It was sent to me 7 o'clock last night. 7:23, it says, hello Mr. Davis, in my circle of neighbours, family, etc., we don't care what these individuals do to themselves in prison. Better there than bashing up innocent people when they're at large. We say in general, let them go for it. They're probably on remand for doing the same thing at home in the streets, etc. Just let them be, as obviously they're just doing what they're best at, violence. They'll never likely be any different. Hopefully they'll get put away, John Kerwin, Whangarei. And I responded, dear John Kerwin, thank you. When they are released, they will be even angrier and more violent. I would prefer that they were helped not to be violent. Maybe you or members of your family will be in their way one day when they get out. They will have honed their ability to hurt people, but this is what you want. Good luck to you. Enjoy the community you will have helped to create. Kind regards, Kelvin Davis, MP for Te Tai Tokerau. Mr. Speaker, it's not just the community that the folks like John Kerwin of Whangarei have helped to create. It's the communities that people that run Serco, that have mismanaged corrections, have helped to create, because those people who are getting their lights bashed out now are going to return to our communities, and we have to put up and live with the consequences of their behaviour and the culture that they have lived in while they've been in Mount Eden. Mr Speaker, I'd also like to know about the terms of reference around this review that's going on, because the Minister says that the Ombudsman is able to look into it, but the terms of reference are actually restricted to 3 months in advance. And I'd like to know whether or not the Ombudsman will be able to have a look at that report that was tabled on July the 9th last year and see exactly what it was said, because we're going to OIA it obviously and that'll be redacted, but I want to know if the Ombudsman is actually going to see the whole report, see the whole truth put out there, Mr Speaker. I've also got concerns about the review that it's actually going to focus not on the behaviour of Serco, it's going to focus on the behaviour of the prisoners, and the behaviour of Serco is going to be overshadowed by any sort of review of the prisoners' behaviour, such as the fighting and the contraband.
Sorry, the member's time has expired.
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Paseta Sam Lutawinga.
Mr Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to speak in this debate.